Hi, my name's Sophie. My question might be a little bit ambitious, but I'm just wondering why we can't do both. Why can't we divest or divest from the criminals and invest in the oppressor and the
Very good. Nice question. Did you both get it to my two debaters? So here's your chance. Why can't you do both? Divest and invest. Yeah, go first. It doesn't matter.
If what you mean, and I think what you mean is that we would cease to put our capital into Israeli or other corporations involved in the violation of human rights of Palestinians and invest in Palestinian society and economy and build it up, I could not agree more. Our government, as I said at the outset, has been complicit in these violations. You know, there's a rich history of our government's complicity. I barely scraped the surface. This has been documented by, for example, something like EPN, where it goes all the way back to the partition of Palestine and the role of Lester B. Pearson in that, and the Supreme Court Justice of Canada named Rand. They played a very regrettable role in the foundation of injustice, and we have an obligation to build Palestinian society back up and to give them a decent life. I couldn't agree more with your proposition.
Thank you.
So, interesting thing about the opposite BDS I presented, the PIR of Palestine, is Palestine's economy is so, I think dysfunctional is the right way to describe it. It's dysfunctional because of the situation that they're in. If we invest in Palestinian businesses and purchase their goods, they start building up an economy, we now have something that we can actually begin to perform sanctions on that side as well. So, again, my opposition to BDS that I explained earlier, that it is a negation of an affirmative voice for the Green Party, but sanctions are not off the table for either side. However, to sanction Palestine at this point, it's like, what are you left sanctioning? I will speak in ignorance here. I don't know if there's any Palestinian goods that I can actually purchase at my grocery store.
There is.
Okay, wonderful. I'd love to hear that.
The BDS website will tell you the others. Maybe Diana, the next speaker, will get us some places.
Great. So your suggestion of saying, can't we do both? Can't we help with one side and also perform some kind of punishment on the other side? Sure, but again, I said this before, I think it's very important. It has to be timely, so you can't catch up for 10 years of conservative government behavior. You can't do that overnight. It's very disjointed. It has to be timely, it has to be consistent, it has to be focused. It has to be consistent behavior, so we can't have this sporadic behavior while we change governments. There has to be a transition. Anything is better than what we had for the last 10 years. And it has to be focused. So you can't just apply it to the entire economy. It has to be very focused on military activity, for example. Being a non-violent party, that would be an ideal target for the Greens to point towards. And I don't think it would create much fervor in the Canadian public psyche.
Thank you. Okay, now we go to this side.
I'm just wondering, in the same context about so-called investment in Palestine, how one can invest in the context of a military occupation when the Israeli government systematically destroys trees and farms and the economy and water treatment plants and virtually anything that UNRWA or other NGOs invest in get destroyed.
And I thought you may have mentioned Jean-Luc asked for what we could buy from Palestinian. I know zaytun, olive oil for one, and you can go on the internet and find things, some Palestinian products that you could buy. Sorry.
They're not Palestinian products, they're products that are made in the occupied territories by Israelis.
Even zaytun, olive oil?
That's the only one.
Okay. Not many, but okay. So, sorry to interrupt your question, but did you both remember a question?
Could you restate it?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted your question. It's my fault. Could you restate it? I'm sorry about that.
How can one favor investing as an alternative to boycott and divestment in the context of a military occupation that systematically destroys every economic investment that happens for Palestinians, right down to the one at 18, you know, trying to have a cows co-op gets destroyed.
So, as was mentioned earlier, it's not about alternatives, right? You can invest and you can sanction. The question is, how can you invest in a Palestinian economy if it's under siege constantly? So the Palestinian economy, there is employment, there are goods being produced, we just mentioned them, so there is at least a nescient economy to invest in. Now, ask yourself, how tempting would it be for the Philippines to attack a Moro village if they know that there are Canadian investors who have invested in a factory there? What would be the diplomatic response from Canada if a factory that is being invested in, sponsored, funded, some kind of business interest of a Canadian, all of a sudden it gets wiped out from a military attack? I would argue that investing in Palestine, having Canadians and other people internationally investing in Palestine, would make it more diplomatically perhaps unfeasible for Israel to make those attacks. I recognize you disagree, Diana, and that's fine, but I say that the Green Party believes in using economics for good, and we have to do that because whether we like it or not, we live in an economy, and we have to use the tools of the economy to bring about the social change that we want. And I recognize that the effort of divestment is an attempt at that, but like I said earlier, it is a divergent behavior from how the Green Party normally operates.
One of the things I did when I was, apart from speaking to Palestinians who were living under the grinding occupation, when I went to the occupied territories in April and May, was I met with a gentleman who worked with a German NGO in the West Bank. And he told me something that I didn't know. He told me that the state of Israel is destroying EU-funded projects in the occupied territories. And he said he didn't want me to reveal his name because in Germany, criticism of Israel is highly sensitive for obvious reasons. But he said to me, you need to know this and you should look into this more carefully. Personally, he said, I think this is retaliation for an extremely modest measure that the EU took of labeling West Bank products. They didn't even go to the point of calling for an embargo on these products or banning their importation. All they did was say, let's label them, and this is retaliation. And in fact, I started to research this when I came back, and I found out that there are scores of EU-funded projects that have been destroyed by the state of Israel, including playgrounds for children. So the idea that investment could be an alternative, a replacement for divestment and for BDS generally, is simply not supported by the facts. The two must go hand in hand. There has to be a price to be paid by Israel for doing things as outrageous as destroying EU-funded projects that are designed to benefit, for example, Palestinian children. If there is no price, which is currently the case and has been the case for decades, then that money is likely going to go to waste, and we can put it to better uses.
All right, your left hand side.
Hi, my name is Steve. I'll keep this under a minute. First of all, I want to request if the slides can be available, because there's a lot of good information on those slides. My question relates to, does Canada have a very special or unique moral obligation to be engaged in this conflict? I think we do. It's been noted that apartheid South Africa modeled its legislation off of the Canadian Indian Act and the Canadian example under international law. They're both colonial. And apartheid South Africa's most stalwart supporter right to the very end was the government of Israel. We do have a precedent in using boycott and sanction, and that was when Brian Mulroney's government led the West in condemning apartheid South Africa, which led to its changeover and releasing Nelson Mandela. Finally, I think we have a moral obligation because the festering Israeli-Palestinian conflict is arguably the pilot light of all of the political conflict that is taking place in the Middle East. The question is, do we have a primary and moral obligation? I have a couple of comments for Jean-Luc. get a different acronym than PIR because it sounds very, very close to RIP, which I don't think you want. And I think as you go into your policy convention, it would be good. Now, I work with entrepreneurs, I'm an entrepreneur, and I work in IT security, and I suspect that in IT security you have relationships.
Okay, thank you for your question. I think your time's up. Thanks.
Time's up and then
All right, I'll let Dimitri go first in answering that, and then Jean-Luc.
Shortly after the convention in Ottawa, the GDPC convention, I managed to make it to the World Social Forum in Montreal, and I watched a panel with Omar Barghouti, the founder, one of the founders of the BDS movement, and a gentleman by the name of Ali Aboumina, who is the chief editor-in-chief of Electronic Intifada, an excellent source for correct information about what's being done to the Palestinian people. Interestingly, Omar Barghouti had to participate in Skype because apparently he's been told by the Israeli authorities that if he leaves his homeland, he will not be permitted to return. But in the course of Ali Aboumina's presentation, he said, he asked the audience, do you know where the concept, the South African concept of the Bantustan came from? I had no idea. He said it came from Canada, and Canada's treatment of Indigenous peoples. We provided a conceptual foundation, our government, our country, for apartheid. And we have continued, we've perpetuated that inglorious tradition in our dealings with the State of Israel. You know, you look at our voting record at the United Nations, we've given the State of Israel preferential treatment. As I say, major figures from Canadian politics were heavily complicit in an unjust partition of Palestine. You know, we allow arms sales to the State of Israel. We embrace its leader as our dear friend on the international stage. The fact of the matter is we do have a very heavy obligation to act. And I, for one, support wholeheartedly our government taking the lead in that regard. Thank you.
So we do have an obligation to act when we see injustice. Canada is fundamentally a citizen of the world, and we do have to act when we see injustice, when we see transgression, especially of international law. Maritime law, I find one in the context of the Israel-Palestine conflict particularly troubling, Canada's silence on. So yes, we do have an impetus to act. The parallels to apartheid, we need to be a little bit cognizant that South Africa is operating in a different context than Israel. If we start parallelizing apartheid with the Israeli-Palestinian situation, you have to realize that will not bring about any change in the Israeli mindset. It'll actually harden it. In South Africa, when boycotts, divestments, and sanctions, true government sanctions, were starting to be instituted, it affected South Africa because they saw themselves as good members of the British Commonwealth, and all of a sudden all the other members of the British Commonwealth made them a pariah. Israel doesn't operate from that context. So when we call it apartheid, understand that all it will do is harden that position. Now, the parallelism with Aboriginals here in Canada and First Nations is very appropriate. So let's look at the right of return. At first I thought what the right of return meant is that if you leave the Palestinian territories and you travel abroad, you'll be able to go back to the Palestinian territories. I understand now that that's not what it means. It means that your grandfather used to live in what is now called Israel, and you're allowed to go back there and reclaim that land. So that is what the right of return actually means. So let's think of that in the context of here in Canada. That means the University of Ottawa would have to hand over the keys to the university, to the Algonquin Nation. Okay? That means your home is gone. My home is gone if you live in Ottawa. Like, it's not even ours anymore. So there are legal dominoes that start falling off from the right of return here in Canada. So we need to be careful about how far back do we go, because maybe Palestine was actually, that particular territory was owned by Jews and then Palestinians and then Jews and then Palestinians, because the history there is so very, very long and complicated. We have to draw the line somewhere, and I don't know where it's going to be drawn, but right of return is problematic for exactly that reason. Sorry, I went over my limit. That was one of the things I wanted to do.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to this side here.
A couple of points. First of all, for Jean-Luc, you were talking about the paradigm that the Greens are supposed to have of being more proactive, more positive, as opposed to punishment, if you recall. But how do you align that with the whole notion of taxes on pollution, of a carbon tax? And I'd like to put that to you. And also for both pundits, given that so much of Palestinian ceded territory has been essentially annexed to the point that it's virtually impossible to have a state of Palestine on one contiguous piece of land, it speaks to the notion of urgency. And given that there's been no economic pressure on Israel for decades, and it's only led to the near extinction of Palestine, isn't it high time for some change? And the third point, as a question, to a member of Shadow Cabinet, why is the Envision Green, the policy missing that we are to label imports from the Palestinian territories as opposed to simply calling them from Israel?
Okay, it looks like you have 3 questions. It'll be a challenge for our debaters.
Because the questions were directed to John, we must have taken our comments.
Okay. Dimitri has kindly said that since the questions were directed to Jean-Luc, Jean-Luc could have Dimitri's time.
All right. So, carbon tax. Is that a punishment tactic? Was the first question. So, I would say no, and this is why. If I give my child a lollipop every single night, and then one day I finally realize that giving them lollipops every single night is not good, and I take it away, the child will see it as a punishment. But the reality is that it was preferential treatment all along. We just didn't factor in the price of carbon from the beginning. So I would argue that no, it's not a punishment tactic. It's recognition that this is a cost that needs to be worked in now. So what's the second question?
Regarding the urgency.
Right, the urgency, because we are, all of us, are concerned that if there is going to be a two-state solution, that we need to start going down the two-state path now. So the two-state path doesn't just start by punishing Israel. It doesn't start by punishing Israel, you have to give them the state now. It has to start by us recognizing the goods that come from Palestine, like the example you gave. So one of the consensus policies, the consensus motion has been put together by Shadow Cabinet. I have proposed specifically that we should use the Green Party's long history of labeling goods. We want everything good, all the goods labeled. This microphone, where did it come from? I don't know, let's check the label. The Greens want those labels everywhere so that consumers have the information they need so they can make the decision and the purchase that they want. So that is one of my proposals in the Shadow Cabinet motion that's going to December. Now, there are still problems with that because the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement, there are clauses in there that prevent that kind of labeling. However, I feel that this is a path towards consensus, and it's one that needs to be worked on and explored more. Free trade agreements do limit governments on a lot of the things that they can do, and it's often not possible to have a policy motion at a single party's convention to have the weight and the expertise of the Department of Foreign Affairs to weigh in on these sorts of things. But I'm willing to look past that to stay consistent with how the Green Party labels things. But I think that's all the answers.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to this side.
Hi, thank you. My name is James O'Grady. I'm here from Ottawa. My background in the Green Party is with communications. I was the Director of Communications for the Green Party of Ontario in 2007. In that campaign, we tripled our vote from 2.8 to 8.3%. We did it because at the core of our strategy was to implement a filter, a values filter, I called it. A combination of logical reasoning, which I studied at university, applied to our values in terms of what is messaging and what is policy that we can talk about that fits within the 6 values of the Green Party. Now, we've seen them up, we've talked about them today, but I'm concerned that this does violate 2 of them, nonviolence and respect for diversity. We can talk about it later if anybody wants to. My question to mainly Jean-Luc, but Dimitri, if you have an answer, you can certainly respond, is that we've had tremendous amount of backlash publicly. I had to screamed at CFRA for 5 minutes in August for calling us racist. There has been a lot of backdrop. Is this an important issue to the Green Party of Canada, given we have a historic election coming up? And is there any chance that it will actually be included in our platform?
Okay, well, let now Dimitri go first and then Jean-Luc.
Look, you know, a lot of people have asked me about the effect this is having on the party. You know, I know that there have been people who have been irate. I know that many people have written to the leader. I don't doubt that, although I myself have never seen these communications. I don't doubt they exist. I'm sure you got streamed at, and I know that there have been many people in our party who've had to have unpleasant conversations. But I ask again, why do we not acknowledge the existence of the other voices? There are thousands of people who have written to our leader and have said that they are wildly enthusiastic about this policy. The action is not one-sided. The reaction has not been one-sided. It's been diverse. And there was a poll released in 2014 about Canadians' attitudes towards the so-called conflict between Palestinians and Israel. And it was the latest poll that was done as far as I can tell. It was 2 months before the Israeli assault on Gaza killed 551 children. So one would think that if anything after that attack, the sympathies of Canadians moved in the direction of Palestinians. But let's take those numbers at face value. What do the numbers show? The numbers showed that 67% of Canadians did not declare sympathies for one side or the other, and the remainder were equally split. Within the margin of error, 17% were sympathetic to Israel, 16% were sympathetic to the Palestinians. Now I ask you, who in our parliament speaks for those 16% of Canadians? Name one person who has had the courage to stand up in our parliament and say, I stand with the oppressed Palestinian people. Nobody. 16% implies millions of Canadians.
How many votes is that going to win us?
But hey, 16% implies millions of Canadians. Those votes are there for the taking, as are in fact the entire progressive end of the political spectrum, which has been completely abandoned by the political class in this country. Nobody speaks for progressive.
So, if proportional representation is going to be the model we're going towards, the question we'd ask ourselves, if we are a shrewd, purely calculating political party, are we going to get more votes and volunteers by adopting this policy than by not adopting it? I can't see, and because it's politics, it's the dirty science, right? There is no conclusive way to say, yes, if we're going to get it, no, we're not. 16% don't have a voice. Maybe the Green Party, by doing this, is going to attract the 60%. I'm very, very concerned that if we do adopt this policy, based on the signals that have been given to us by the leaders of multiple of our provincial parties, from our federal leader herself, these are people who are the thought leaders in the green politics of our country. They're very concerned about this because it's going to either split the party right in half, or those who are very adamant about this will sign up in droves and become members, which is wonderful, but then we will lose all our other volunteers. This is the kind of transformative policy that can either schism a party or can sink it. And I'm frankly concerned that I don't know if there is a way for even a shrewd political thinker who has no values whatsoever could actually make the call about what to do. So I am very concerned. I would much more appreciate if we could have some form of consensus within the party to say, look, we're going to take our existing policy. Yes, no, the Conservatives aren't listening to it, the Liberals aren't listening to it, but we're going to move it forward a little bit. I would like to see a change to it, an improvement to it. But I think going BDS all the way, as far as Dimitri has proposed here, is very dangerous for a party because we may end up not having any political party called the Green Party of Canada anymore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we move over to the left side.
2-second comment on what you just said, that I am not a member of the Green Party, but would be much more interested in the Green Party if I saw it take a principled position. Anyway, for my question, this is just a general question of great puzzlement, looking at the Green Party, seeing the leadership, like seeing Elizabeth May and her position, and seeing these provincial leaders in their position. I just look at it and say, why? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I'll say why, because basically, I can't see any really strong arguments that have been made today against this part of the BDS motion movement, or that I can't really see any strong arguments. Like I see you, or that are based on facts. I see you having some additional things that you would like to do. That's fine, but against the actual the stuff that was in the motion, I really can't see that strong an argument. So, why?
Thanks. So, the question is, the BDS movement, why am I opposed to it? You haven't sold me on it, is fundamentally what you're saying. And this is the reality of everything to do with the Middle East, right? I can make impassioned arguments. For example, there's a string of words in the English language that do not exist that would change Dimitri's position on this. And that's just a reality. And there's a string of words that Dimitri would want to say that also doesn't exist, that would change my view that adopting BDS is too extreme for the Green Party to go down. And so this is the dirty science of politics, is how do you objectively say this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, when we ourselves don't live that life. We ourselves are not living the day-to-day reality of what's going on there for the Israelis or the Palestinians, right? And it is very dangerous to pick a policy, I feel, that has so many hangers onto it that are dangerous. Earlier, Dimitri mentioned Omar Barghouti, one of the co-founders of the BDS movement. He has said some very troubling things about Israel, that he said BDS will not stop until Israel isn't there anymore. That he's looking at Israel that have gone to the far right of the political spectrum, and there's very strong evidence towards that. But he goes so far as to say that Israel is instituting a form of ethnic cleansing. You cannot have someone, by the way, this was quoted in the Real News Network, someone that Dimitri works for. This is very dangerous to have someone like that attached to a movement that's now attached to a Canadian political party. It is dangerous. So let us find language for the Green Party of its own volition, of its own vocabulary, to describe what we're going to do in Israel and Palestine, and not attach it to this movement.
Okay. Dimitri, I'm sure you're going to answer that.
Yeah, Israel is engaged in ethnic cleansing. It's been engaged in crazy ethnic cleansing for decades before our very eyes. When are we going to have the moral courage to call a spade a spade? It's ethnic cleansing. And I commend Omar Barghouti, who is under threat, who lives under severe threat. The man could be imprisoned, killed any day in the increasingly fanatical environment in which he lives in Israel, for having the courage to say this. But I'm not aware of him ever having said that he wants to see the destruction of Israel. I mean, this is news to me. He may have said, and let's be very clear, he may have said that he disagrees with the notion of Israel as a Jewish state. If that's what he said, I challenge you to come up with a proof that Omar Barghouti, sir, and I ask Jean-Luc also, provide me with proof that he said he advocated for the destruction of the state of Israel. If anything, he would have said that Israel as a Jewish state is an illegitimate concept because it implies that Palestinians, even if they have a demographic majority in the country, cannot have control of the affairs of the state, and they must be marginalized, and they must be under the domination of the Jewish population. He has said clearly, to my knowledge, that all citizens of Israel, whether they be Arab or Jewish, have equal rights. And that is a concept. And since I have to go into something else gratuitously, because I keep hearing about these leaders, I don't know, I mean, there's a leader standing here from the Green Party of Quebec, Alex Terrell. Okay? He has been a champion of Palestinian rights ever since we've started this discussion, and has wholeheartedly and passionately embraced BDS. So don't think that only Andrew Weaver has expressed an opinion on this. We have somebody on the other side who has been equally adamant in his support of BDS, and admirably so. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you. Just as a starter, I think it would be very helpful if the chair asked people to say whether they're members of the Green Party or not before they make their
I'll ask you to say your
interventions.
name, and if you want your affiliation, that's fine.
My name is Peter Larson. I have been a member of the Green Party for 10 years. I'm sorry to say I'm a lousy member. I give them money and I don't even always vote Green, but I think that a lot of the things the Green Party does is very worthwhile, and I'm happy to have them represented in Parliament as they are. I want to congratulate both the speakers, well, three of you. I think it's terrific that this debate is taking place, debate about how to deal with this issue. It's a debate that's been conducted civilly, and I think that's wonderful. And I've probably given as many presentations on BDS as anybody in this room, so I know a fair amount about it. I do have a question for the two speakers. I think irrespective of how the vote unfolds in Calgary, and I don't know how it's going to unfold in December, there clearly will be still disagreements within the party over this issue. That will go on for a long time. And I'm wondering whether either of the two speakers would be in favor of, either way, would be in favor of the Green Party undertaking some kind of educational program, perhaps a series of seminars across the country, perhaps even a study tour to Israel. I've taken several study tours there. I'd be thrilled to lead a study tour. We could go to J&F projects there. We could go to the Stephen Harper Bird Sanctuary in the Hula Valley. We could go to the John Baird Park in Sderot. We could go to Canada Park. We could visit the Green Party of Israel, so that a group of people would come back more knowledgeable and able to help the Green Party form a concrete position on this. One thing it might want to investigate, if such a thing took place, there are today approximately, within 150 kilometers of Jerusalem, there's approximately 6.5 million Israeli Jews. In that same area, 150 kilometers from Jerusalem, there are approximately 11 million Palestinians. And I would like someone to say, how is a two-state solution going to solve it may solve the problem for people in the West Bank, but how is it going to solve the problem for the refugees? And how is it going to solve the problem for the Palestinians living in Israel today? I don't understand. I don't have a position on it as a Canadian. It's up to them to decide. But lots of people actively support the two-state solution, and I don't think they know what that would actually do. So that's something else that a study group or study tour could look at. Thanks very much.
You're wondering, is there a question in there?
Yeah, just would we undertake the education?
Okay. Dimitri's got the question.
Well, there are two. As you know, Peter, I am engaged in a tour, an educational tour. I've done 4 town halls, 2 in Toronto, 1 in Montreal, and 1 in North Bay. And they were very constructive discussions. I've got next week a full slate. I'm going to Kitchener-Waterloo, Winnipeg, Victoria. I'll be in Calgary and Edmonton before the end of the month, and also in Vancouver on the 21st. And I'm being joined by wonderful speakers, including in Kitchener-Waterloo by Rehab Nazal, a Palestinian Canadian journalist who was shot in the leg by an Israeli sniper earlier this year while documenting the noxious activities of Israeli skunk trucks in Bethlehem. And also Wendy Goldsmith, who was on the women's boat to Gaza. These are extraordinary opportunities for us to reach out to members of the party and to engage in a discussion and educate them to the plight of the Palestinian people, because the mainstream media in this country is doing an absolutely abominable job of informing Canadians about what's going on. You know, if your suggestion is that we should table what we've done, engage in this educational process, and then come back and revisit it, you didn't say that, but maybe that's your inclination. I say that we don't have the luxury of time anymore. We have a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And as you've indicated, the conditions on the ground are becoming so adverse to the creation of a second state, sovereign Palestinian state, that we have to act now. We don't have the luxury of spending 3 years educating people in this country. We've got to act now. And I'm doing everything I personally can between now and the SGM in December, where we're going to revisit this resolution to educate the members of our party about this.
Great. So, if I understand this clearly, we should act before the members of the party have been educated on the subject.
No, I think many members of the party are fully on board. They actually voted for the resolution 3 times. So there's no evidence that they aren't on board. They expressed quite clearly their will.
Okay, so please. So remember that diagram I showed you earlier? The number of members in the Green Party of Canada, the number is about 20,000. The number of people who voted in electronic voting was approximately 1,200. The number of members that showed up at the convention were 300. So now we have the numbers for how many people actually participated in these different votes. So to say that the party is now knowledgeable on Middle Eastern affairs, so much so that they can take this, that we want to turn down this offer to go off and actually educate not only parliamentarians but also members of the Green Party and thought leaders of the Green Party is a little bit troubling. I personally have never enjoyed voting when I was a young man for a parliamentarian that I know for a fact doesn't have their facts on a critical issue for me. And I wouldn't recommend any of you to vote for me if the Israel-Palestinian conflict is your principal concern. Then no, perhaps I'm not the member of parliament for you. But for me, there are many issues that a Green MP needs to champion. And there are 338 members of parliament. And Dimitri and I disagree on this, in that I feel that the Green Party's role in this is not to pick the Palestinian side and carry that flag. I feel the Green Party's role in the next parliament is going to be the party of peace, the party of nonviolence, the party of climate change and the environment. And if we have a thought leader within Parliament, perhaps it is even Dimitri himself that will be elected next, then he is the person that will help guide us through this. But he has to do it through consensus. And I feel very strongly that what happened in August does not represent the complete will of the complete membership.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. I know. We're running out of time, I've been reminded. And it looks like not every person there will be able to give up. I would say that this gender parity thing, the woman in this line should be allowed to move up the front. And then, her go next, and one over here. I'm sorry about this, but the other thing is we can all vote to go beyond 9 o'clock, but then Dimitri goes.
Let's vote. Let's do a vote.
Who would want to stay beyond 9 o'clock?
I do.
Okay, but look, nobody else get in line. These are the last 6. And we're going to go beyond 9 o'clock and let the women go next.
Let's do it 1 a.m. I want to stay all night. People are dying.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Amanda. I'd like to thank you guys for both coming, as I do think this is a much-needed debate. The chances of a viable state are diminishing, and clearly the previous GPC policies and spirit of affirmative voice have not been effective. So I have 2 questions. In the event that the resolution is overturned in December, do you believe that the resolution of investing are realistic given the time-sensitive manner? As Dimitri mentioned, Gaza may not be livable by 2020, according to research. My second question is, as someone who is born and raised in Gaza, what would you do to ensure my right to return if it is overturned?
So, the right to return, as I explained earlier, is complicated. So, let me just get you to answer this question first. So, you cannot return to Gaza, where you lived, and so this is problematic. Let's just leave it like that. I feel that the Green Party would, as members, we would ask that people who want to return to lands within Palestinian territory should be free to do so. It's the claiming back land that is no longer within Palestinian territories which becomes a legal nightmare. And my lawyer friend to the right of me will attest to land ownership is murky in older parts of the world. So the other question you had was about if the policy is reversed. Remind me again?
If it is overturned and you suggest your solution of investing in Palestinian.
Right. So now I remember your opening sentence. You said our existing policy isn't doing anything, therefore why should we keep going with it? So I feel that is an unfair assessment of our policy because we only have one member of parliament representing 0.3% of all parliamentarians. And our party's policy cannot be measured to that effect if we only have that many representatives. So I would argue that our existing policy plus other elements, which I'm running out of time, with addition to other elements to refresh the policy, would actually be very effective if we were in Parliament with several dozen members of Parliament.
You reminded me with your question of something that Jean-Luc said earlier in our discussion, and I wrote it down again. He talked about the possibility of, Indigenous peoples coming back and reclaiming land that has now been settled by mostly, but certainly not exclusively, the descendants of Europeans. And he said, his words were, "My home is gone." Well, that's what the Palestinian people are saying every day. Their houses are being demolished. Their land is being taken. And this is happening now, before our very eyes, that their homes are being taken from them. They're being destroyed. Their land is being confiscated. Why is that reaction any less legitimate or important than your reaction when you contemplate Indigenous peoples coming and reclaiming the land that has been taken from them unjustly? Palestinian rights matter. I fully support the right of return. I didn't ask our party to support the right of return because I thought that we have to go one step at a time, and that might be a bridge too far. It is a very complicated issue. We have to find a way to reintegrate Palestinian refugees into either a single state where everybody has an equal right, or some federal arrangement or a two-state solution. But that's a problem that we have to deal with, and justice will not be done until they're allowed to come home.
Thank you.
My name is Ed Natke. I'm probably the oldest person here. I'm in my 93rd year. And I have lived through this area of Palestine, Israel, and the conflict in the Middle East. My question, two, I have 1,000, but two. Why are we still using the word settlement, which falls into the government's trap? It's not, these are not settlements. These are occupied lands. Call them that. The other question is, Israel has a right to be there. Good. Who's going to challenge them? Unarmed Palestinians? I have an article from, just a second, I have an article from the Sun back in 2012, and they measured the armament of Hamas, 12,000 troops, against the military might of the United States, of Israel, which was the 10th largest firepower in the world at the time, including the atomic bomb. Who's going to get rid of Israel from within that area? Crazy.
Okay,
Two questions.
Thank you for your questions.
But the questions were, why are we still using the term settlement? And the other was, who's going to get rid of Israel? Nobody from this group.
Right. Well, I just, and maybe it's wrong for me to do this, I use the word settlement just because it's become part of the accepted
But
jargon.
it's not acceptable.
Well, clearly the land is occupied. That is the international consensus, and you are absolutely correct to characterize it in that way. And when you look at the Fourth Geneva Convention, it actually doesn't, the word settlement doesn't appear anywhere in there. What it talks about is the transfer of the domestic population of the occupier to occupied territory. And it says that's a violation of the 4 Geneva Convention. And that is also defined as a war crime under the Rome Statute. So I'm happy to dispense with the term settlement. I think we have to always keep our eye on the ball, which is if this is an occupation and a brutal one at that.
It has to be emphasized, and the public has to be informed, it's occupation, not settlement.
Yes.
Settlement is soft. They're welcomed in, this is not the way. And the other thing is the military might.
Yeah, it's like turning tar sands into oil sands makes it softer. So the other thing I'll say to you is, just to be clear, I'm not advocating for the destruction of Israel. I think we have to find a way to integrate the existing Jewish population. No one in their right mind, I would think, would advocate for them to be forced to leave. They're there. That's a fact of life. A just solution must be found that gives all persons, regardless of their ethnicity, equal rights.
Justice for all, including your enemies. This has to be what's going on. We don't have that. It's totally off-site.
Okay, thank you. Jean-Luc, you want to...
That should be really quick. To sort of compare Israel's armament with Hamas's armament, yes, it is asymmetric, but to say who's going to go in there and push Israel around is fundamentally a violent concept, right? Because you want more arms against, your big stick against their big stick. Ultimately, when you start getting to that kind of standoff, you get stuff that's happening in Crimea, right? You get armies fighting each other. Yeah.
This is what's happening there in Gaza.
Right. So as a non-violent party, we would not go down that path saying, how do we bring a bigger stick into the fight? That's just not where we're going to go.
You have to use the language.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, we've got, I think, one more on this side and 2 on this side, and then we're done.
Looks like 2.
Oh, we got 2 on this side. Okay, 4, no more. Yeah.
Sorry. So first of all, I'd like to thank both of you for coming out here and taking time to speak about this issue. Yes, thank you. My name is Josh. I'm a millennial, and I was a Green Party candidate in Markham Thornhill in the 2015 election. And I just want to say that it's part of the reason why I think the Green Party has this strength is its courage to talk about issues that other parties simply will not touch. And this is one of those issues. And today I feel really strongly in support of the party. I was at convention. I voted in favor of this motion, a resolution. And so my question is, just to give everybody a better idea of what you both are advocating, probably more for Jean-Luc, because I'm sure if we're looking for ways to implement BDS, we could look at the website. But for Jean-Luc, how would your resolution, how would it stop Israel from continuing its settlements? And what would we do to protect our investments? You talked a little bit about that there. Earlier on, you mentioned that one of your criticisms was that BDS wasn't actionable. How would you action your resolution?
Sure, thanks. So that opening comment, by the way, no political party would hold a debate like this with its own candidates on this topic or anything remotely close to this. And maybe that's a fault of our party to engage so openly in these discussions, but I truly believe it's a strength of ours. All right, so the question is how would we go about actioning further investment in Palestine to help build up its economy, and how would we protect that investment? Interesting thing about how global economies work is that once you have economic interconnectedness, wars actually become a disincentive. That, along with a proper democratic society that will vote saying, well, why would I go to war when I have a perfectly good job here? No, you leaders, you have to go out and talk it over, something like this, and figure it out so we don't have to resort to bringing sticks and fights. So I feel that actually having more economic investment in Palestine itself will become the deterrent, far greater than any military deterrent that would actually come about. Like you think of all the wars and conflicts in Europe, they aren't marching over each other's lands anymore, well, most of Europe anyhow. And that's because they have tight economic connections. So if we try and increase these economic connections within Palestine, not just, because right now 80% of Palestine's trade is with Israel. And if we try to increase that, we can make it more international, then there's more international interest in what goes on within Palestine, and there'll be a disincentive for Israel itself to begin perhaps stepping over those lines that we clearly explain in our existing policy.
I'll just say that billions and billions of dollars have been invested in Gaza, and Gaza is worse off today than it has ever been. For the simple reason that Israel is suffocating the economy of Gaza with, as Amnesty International says, a blockade that constitutes collective punishment and is therefore a violation of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Israel has put Gazans on a diet, basically just keeping them hanging on. Thousands of them are homeless. Entire families, sir, if you wanted to ask a question, sir, you were entitled to go to the microphone and ask one. You chose not to. Okay, the fact of the matter is that Israel has destroyed the economy of Gaza. And it continues to destroy the economy of Gaza, and we can pour billions more down the drain, and it will continue to destroy the economy of Gaza until it's held to account. It must suffer a penalty for its crimes.
Thank you very much, both of you. My name is Brett Parnell. I come from Algonquin College's School of Travel and Tourism. Personally, to me, just a bit of background, I'm not involved in any political party. I voted for different political parties, and I frankly hate the party system. So I want to know, do you believe the Green Party can broaden its reach to unaffiliated Canadians like myself when the party split on such a divisive issue? Because just as there's many people in Canada in this room who are very passionate about the Palestinian cause, there's also millions of Canadians, myself included, who are passionate about Israel's right to exist and Israel's right to defend its own people.
It's a very fair question, and what I want to do after December, what I want to have happen after December is that this virtual political line somehow going right through Eric, right here, between two different views of how to go about solving this problem will be dissolved, and the Green Party will have a single voice and a single vision for what to do moving forward. My true fear of this is that regardless what happens, there will be one voice within the Green Party, and it's a question of which one is it going to be. Is there going to be consensus, or is there going to be this side, or is there going to be that side? I would rather have consensus because I don't want to lose people like Dimitri, people who are passionate, people who want to make the world a better place. And these volunteers who come to the Green Party, I'm having problems even approaching them on the phone. They don't even want to talk about this issue. It is politically very caustic for all the reasons why the other political parties don't engage in these kinds of open discussions. And yeah, so it is a problem that the Green Party is going to have to deal with after December. And my hope is that we are going to have one voice, one consistent way forward that neither of us are really going to like, but it's going to be something that we as a party can move forward on.
Well, I share that hope, but as I said earlier, if you're looking for a party that has unequivocal, unambiguous, unrelenting support for the state of Israel, you've got plenty of options. You could vote Liberal, you could vote NDP, you could vote Conservative, you could even vote for the Bloc, if you happen to live in Quebec and you're a separatist. The fact of the matter is there's no option for the people who actually have real sympathy for the Palestinian people. We need to become that option.
So this question is more directed just a bit more directed at Jean-Luc. So earlier on in your introduction, you stated that you don't think the BDS movement is necessarily effective and might affect the Palestinians in a negative manner. But as a non-Palestinian, or in other words, white man, who do not live through the Israeli apartheid, how do you feel about yourself going about criticizing the BDS movement, which is something that the Palestinian Society called for, and telling Palestinians how to go about dealing with their own oppressions? And how do you feel about yourself just addressing this issue at all? Thank you.
The Palestinian BDS open letter is a call to the world saying, this is what we would like to do. And the world can say, no thank you, we want to do something different. And that is completely justifiable and a sovereign decision that we can make as a country. And as a political party, we make the calculation, we make the principled decision, we find our own consensus saying where is the Green Party's collectively our position on what to do with Israel and Palestine. It may very well be that majority of Green Party members say, no, we want BDS, that's the path we want to go down, and that's what they decide in December. It may also mean that the case that members of the Green Party will say, no, we think that that is problematic for many other reasons, and we want to come up with our own language. Neither of which is telling Palestinians what to do with their lives. Palestinians are asking for help, and they're saying, this is what we would like to have done, this is what we're asking for, and as Canadians, and as members of the political party, we have to decide how to respond to that request, because ultimately, it is a request, not a demand, and is not, and just as we cannot force on Palestinians how they should go about solving the problem, they can't demand us to do it, otherwise they don't want to talk to us. That's not diplomacy. And in real diplomacy, and I fully expect that the Palestinians all over the world will say, look, we want BDS, but these are the principles we're aiming for. You can do BDS by, you can leave BDS behind, but these are the goals we're aiming for. Self-determination, statehood, and the right of return is a tricky one, but I'm sure that, as you saw with the earlier question, that there is some kind of ground that can be met on that. Thanks.
Okay, we're moving along, we're soon finished. Yes, I think we've got the last question.
My name is Yves. I missed the opening debate, but I heard your, Jean-Luc, this is mostly for Jean-Luc, your thing about the carbon tax not being punishment because it's like taking away a lollipop after day 10. And I think that you're speaking from a really intense level of ignorance about the dynamic of Canada's role in all this, right? You go back 150 years, and Canada was supporting ideologically the Zionist movement, actually begins Christian movement. You go into 47, and go into 1917, when there was Canadians that helped conquer that part of the world with the British Empire, helped conquer Palestine. Then you go to 1947, immense Canadian diplomatic support for the very unjust creation of 55% of historic Palestine Israeli state. Then you can go into the arms, the military that fought in 47, 48 on the Canadian side, arms, and then you can go to all the diplomatic votes of the UN. Then you can run forward today to the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement that allows products produced in illegally occupied West Bank to be shipped to Canada duty-free. Then you can go to the diplomatic support at the UN. Then you can go to hundreds of millions of dollars in Canadian charitable status subsidized by the Canadian taxpayer being given to Israeli charities, including charities operating in the settlements, legal settlements, supporting the American Israeli military. Then you can go to the fact that, and then I have a very simple question ultimately. Then you can go to the fact that one of the elements of what you're kind of claiming is you want a made in-house way of dealing with this problem. You want something that's Canada-focused. Well, we have a situation where there is, as far as I understand, only one single charity that is registered in this country that has explicitly racist worldview policies, and it's subsidized by the Canadian taxpayer. And so my simple question is ultimately, what was your vote on the JNF resolution?
Okay, so the question is, what was my vote on the JNF resolution? The JNF resolution at the convention, as I'm sure you know, because it's kind of a nice leading question, there was a resolution at the last August convention wanting to claim to revoke the charitable status of a charity called the Jewish National Fund of Canada, JNF. My problem with that resolution is that it zeroed in on a single charity, and for a policy, that's more in the area of statement and action. For a policy, we want to have principled and long-term goals. So I had proposed an amendment, and it was adopted, and it passed at the convention that said that we would revoke the charitable status of any charity that engages in violation of human rights, I think was the wording of it. So basically, this is still the same function of the previous motion. And Elizabeth May is still pursuing exactly the action that you're seeking, that have JNF's charitable status reviewed and revoked by CRA. So Elizabeth Bay is pursuing this, but we changed the policy to actually be something that is a policy rather than using the Green Party to make a pronouncement.
Eliminated JNF from the policy. You expanded it, no?
I expanded
Jewish National Fund is no longer part of it.
the word Jewish National Fund is not in the policy
Okay, so
anymore because it was this and I made it this.
But the point is, I started the premise on the point of there's only one explicitly racist registered charity in this country.
And what if another one comes tomorrow? But that's the reason.
What is that?
Finally,
You
Dimitri will respond to that and then we'll close. Thank you.
First of all, Eve, I want to thank you for your book. I'm halfway through it. I thought I understood the extent of the Canadian government's complicity in the suffering of Palestinian people, and I didn't even come close to understanding it. And I can't recommend enough that you read Eve's extraordinary book on the subject. On the question of the JNF resolution, all references to the Jewish National Fund and to Israel have been removed from this resolution. What it currently is a statement of the law. That's all it is. It's just a summary statement of the law. How we think as a party that we accomplished anything by repeating the law is beyond me. You know, Justice Louis Brandeis of the U.S. Supreme Court once said that it is said that the best disinfectant is sunlight. And what he meant was you have to shine a bright light on wrongdoers. And when we removed references to the JNF in Israel from that resolution, we dimmed the lights. We don't even know what we're talking about anymore. And it accomplishes absolutely nothing, I'm sad to say.
We're going to close, and thank you, Eve Engler, for the last question. He's a renowned author, and I don't know if he gave his name, but that was Eve Engler with the last question.